Hey everyone, welcome back to your mat. I'm Dianne Bondy. Welcome to my channel, and please, if you love yoga, hit the subscribe button. I'd love to have you be part of the Dianne Bondy yoga community. Today we're going to do a downward dog reboot, okay? So down dog can be difficult for a lot of people in that it's a lot of wrist pain sometimes. It's hard to stay in that pose because a lot of our weight pushes forward, and if you're in an abundant body, pushing a lot of that weight forward can be painful. Just on the wrist, you can feel a lot of pressure in your face, things like that. So it's time for us to kind of just look at the way that we do downward facing dog and customize this practice to fit our body. We are not changing the body to fit the asana, we're changing the asana to fit the body. So I'm going to start with 2 blocks right off the bat and come to hands and knees. So one way that I like to do down dog, if you have a lot of wrist pain or you're building wrist strength, is to have 2 blocks. I prefer cork blocks because they give me more stability. You can also have foam blocks that maybe have a hard center. And then I'm going to wrap my hands around the blocks, and you'll notice the angle of my wrist stays more open as opposed to when you're in downward dog, the angle of your wrist is a little more closed. So now what I'm going to do is take my blocks out right to the outer edge of my mat, curl my toes under, and lift my hips up and back. Now people have this idea that your heels have to touch the floor. They do for some people, they don't do for most people. So feel free to work at stretching the heels back, firming the arms, and pushing into the blocks. If the blocks feel unstable on this particular angle, go ahead and flatten the blocks down to the most surface area and take your hands over the edge of the block. Again, it keeps the angle of the wrist really open. Walking our knees back, okay, firming our belly and our low ribs, draw in, go ahead and push back to down dog. And how you know your down dog is big enough is if you come forward to plank pose, adjust your feet, and then keeping your feet where they are, push back to down dog. We're gonna hug the upper arms in, so they're gonna rotate in toward the ears. We're gonna roll the heels back, and the gaze is just gonna look between the toes or toward the middle of the mat. So just kind of explore what that feels like. That takes a lot of pressure out of the wrist. It puts more pressure into the palm of the hands, but if you're pushing on the outer edges of the hands, it really helps to strengthen your carpal tunnel. So take a moment here to observe, and then we'll come down. The great thing about doing downward facing dog on the block is that it allows for more space if you're doing a step through transition, right? So the dreaded step through transition, I have lots of videos on this channel for that. It gives you a little bit more space so that people are able to step forward a little more easily. And of course you can add a leg and do it with momentum. I always step to the outside of my mat just to make space for my body. So another way that you can look at this particular posture is you can do a variation of, say, like a puppy pose instead of a down dog. So my knees are out as wide as my outer hips, and then I'm going to spread my fingertips out nice and wide. Okay, and then curling my belly under, pulling my low ribs in, I'm going to sit back into puppy. So that's another way that we can play with down dog, is that we don't have to do the full down dog if the weight is too much. This works really well with people who can't put a lot of weight on their hands, or even seniors who might struggle with this. Another thing you can do for your down dog is to really engage your hands and your upper arms. So coming up onto your finger pads, really pushing into the finger pads, and then lowering the knuckles down and clawing the mat with the knuckles. Then hugging the forearms together as though you're hugging a beach ball, making sure that the creases of the wrist are parallel to the top edge of the mat. Curl your toes under, lift your hips up and back, but lift your arm bones, so lift your arms forward, and then lengthen as you push the mat away. So you're lengthening legs back and arms forward. If you really engage the hands here, like really press into the pads of the fingers, hug the arms together and lengthen, the weight can shift more back into the feet, and you don't have a lot of pressure in the wrist. The pressure is like spread out throughout the hands. So that's something a little bit you can play with. And take a break, rest in puppy, child's pose, and then come back. You can play back and forth with this particular introduction or this particular tutorial in Down Dog. Just start to play with the poses, and again, taking the time to break down and play with the poses can be ultimately your asana practice. Listening to the feedback of your body, because there's a constant biofeedback loop where your body's giving you information, and most of the times we choose to ignore it. So if we're connecting with our body through our practice, we're really observing sensation, we're observing feeling, we're observing what good sensation is, whether we're sweating, maybe our breath is a little bit intensified as part of that practice. But bad sensations when we're feeling overwhelmed, we can't catch our breath, there's a lot of pain. This doesn't have to be a practice of pain and suffering. It can be a practice of enjoying your body and observing that feedback. So remember, this practice is for you, and I encourage you always to customize it to fit your body. Thank you for being here, and I will see you in the next video. Namaste.